criminals. The bad news is they're very productive. And the further good news is the solution is so obvious. Keep them in jail. I mean, we all understand if a young person makes a mistake, they should be rehabilitated and given a second chance, of course. But we're not talking about that here. We're talking about the career criminals who literally commit as many crimes as their waking hours will allow them to do. The police have this saying now, I know it's not very polite to say, they call it FIDO. When they see a crime in progress, they say, forget it, drive on. It's actually not forget it, it's something else. But they just drive on. And they tell me why. Because they know that if they arrest the guy, he'll be back out on the streets in a couple of hours. So the risk to their physical safety is not worth taking them that criminal off the street for 45 minutes. So they just drive on. We have police officers who will tell you that they're not even done the paperwork on the arrest and the offender is back out on the street, reoffending. Even when they're convicted under Liberal legislation backed by the NDP, they get house arrest. So a career car thief can sit at home and watch Netflix or play Grand Theft Auto while he's actually doing his sentence. And then we got the news that both Paul Bernardo and Luca Magnotta are now in so-called medium security penitentiaries. This is a place where there are hockey rinks and tennis courts and human interaction. They can cook for themselves and live in relative freedom within the walls of that facility. These murderers released into medium security by Bill C-83. Now, we were told by all the experts that these policies were so enlightened that they would lead to less crime, that locking up criminals was a good bumper sticker, but in practice it didn't work. Well, the facts are in. The debate is over. Under the previous common sense Conservative government, we brought in tougher penalties for the repeat violent offenders, and violent crime went down by 25%. You know what else went down? Incarceration. We actually had fewer people in jail. Why? We targeted the worst offenders, and we scared the hell out of the rest of them, so they didn't offend. And it worked. We had safe streets and less crime, and now we have precisely the opposite. So a common sense Conservative government will make it so that repeat violent offenders are no longer eligible for immediate bail. It will be jail and not bail. It will be the full sentences, not early parole. It will be mandatory prison time for the repeat offenders. We're told that decriminalizing crack, heroin, cocaine, and other hard drugs was proven by all the experts to work. And then if we added to that taxpayer-subsidized opioids, which they called, ironically, a safe supply, that somehow this was going to protect addicts from overdoses. What has happened? The data's in, the debate is over. We've had 40,000 overdose deaths in the last 8 years, a 200% increase. And where these policies have been tried most enthusiastically, the results have been the most horrifying. BC is ground zero, because not only does Justin Trudeau's policies apply here, but David Eby and the NDP policies have applied here as well. And that is why what they did is they took a walk down the downtown east side 10 years ago, and they said, why don't we try this everywhere? And they expanded the model nationwide. And the irony is, how did the opioid crisis start in the first place? A bunch of corrupt pharmaceutical companies lied to the medical system so that they could push OxyContin on desperate working-class people who were out of luck, out of a job, and out of hope, and they caused a crisis on which they made billions. They knew exactly what they were doing. Documents prove they were literally paying bonuses to the distributors for each overdose they caused. They wanted to supercharge sales. That's how it started. Pharmaceutical-grade opioids. And now, what is the so-called safe supply? Pharmaceutical-grade opioids, profiting the same companies to give out the same drugs that caused the crisis in the first place. And just yesterday, the RCMP confirmed that thousands of these pills have made their way into the hands of organized crime. So your tax dollars are paying for organized criminals to get their hands on the same pharmaceutical drugs that caused the crisis in the first place. This is insanity. I will put an end to it. We will stop funding drugs and start funding treatment and recovery to bring our loved ones home drug-free.
First of all, the drug policy has to be completely reversed. I'm to the point where I don't even know what motivates the policy right now. You know, I thought it was, at first I thought it was just sort of a naive utopianism that was driving this idea of giving out free drugs and decriminalizing these poisons. But now that the evidence is so clear that it has been a nightmare, you have to ask yourself, what's motivating this policy? Because it is totally ravaging our communities. And my common sense plan is to stop funding the distribution of drugs, stop funding these consumption sites, which are not safe, and instead invest in treatment and recovery services. We know this works. You know, Winnipeg visited an incredible facility where they bring in the addict, they give them detox